Unwearied then were Durin's folk, beneath the mountains music woke. The harpers harped, the minstrels sang, and at the gates the trumpets rang.
Well met, friends. Yoiston here with a video on the once renowned but afterwards infamous Khazad-dûm, or Mines of Moria as they are later called. Let's delve into it. Before the creation of the sun, but after the rising of the moon, Durin I, who was put to sleep by Aule the smith, or Mahal as the dwarves called him, awoke beneath the mountain of Gundabad, in the far north of the Misty Mountains, during the years of the trees. Durin walked alone and wandered southward under the stars and moon, until coming across a lake of grand beauty and reflection, at the foot of the mountain that Durin would name Celebdil. The lake he called Keled-Zarum in Khazad-dûm, named Mirror in the common tongue. In the lake, a crown of stars was reflected, and I believe this to be the metaphysical and symbolic crowning of Durin I. It was to the west of this lake, at the base of Celebdil, that the dwarves that awoke would begin the building of the greatest dwarf kingdom, not only in Arda, but in all of fiction. As more and more dwarves began to awake and hearken to King Durin, Khazad-dûm, meaning dwarf mansion, grew. In the First Age, it was thriving, as many more dwarves came here and became known as Durin's folk, and they expanded Khazad-dûm from the east wall by Miromir and the river of Silvertine, or Hildebrant as it is also known, to the land of Holland by the west wall. After Durin I died of old age and was entombed within Khazad-dûm, he became known as Durin the Deathless, the first of the 7 fathers of the dwarves, and a few rare kings that succeeded him were also called Durin by their folk, as these dwarves would bear the appearance and mannerisms of their ancestor, and some of the dwarves of Durin's folk even believed that their kings that were named Durin, such as Durin II all the way through Durin VII, were the reincarnations of Durin I himself. The Durins all ruled in Khazad-dûm, all 7 of them throughout the Legendarium. And Khazad-dûm was always known as the grandest of the 7 dwarven kingdoms to ever be built. It is odd, the dwarves are very associated with the number 7, but so are other pieces of the Legendarium, such as King Elendil and Elisar's banner, with the 7 stars above the white tree, and the crown of Numenor. I believe that is because 7 is always seen as a holy number in our world and in Tolkien's works. And for the dwarves, it must be a blessed number, as there were 7 fathers of the dwarves that began their kin, and they were the original 7 to be created and almost destroyed by Aule. Anyways, getting back to Khazad-dûm, throughout the First Age, both the west and east gates were always kept open, as there wasn't a darkness to fear in Middle-earth. Yet. The men of the Vales of Anduin, who were the ancestors of the Rohirrim and the Dalemen, and I'm sure were closely associated with the ancestors of the Beornings, traded food with the dwarves of Durin II in exchange for armor and weapons. Thus it was that the First Age was a grand time for Khazad-dûm and the dwarves within, and the Second Age began that way also. After the destruction of Beleriand at the end of the First Age, and the destruction of the dwarven cities of Nogrond and Belegost, the dwarves of the Blue Mountains ventured to Khazad-dûm in the year 40 of the Second Age, and they too added to the population of the Grand Kingdom. And after the destruction of many elven homes in Beleriand, the Noldor, led by Galadriel and Celeborn, came to Eregion and established new homes there. And as Eregion is just west of Khazad-dûm, the dwarves of the Misty Mountains and the elves became great allies and traded with one another. After some time, Galadriel and Celeborn went east to the other side of the mountains and established the kingdom of Lothlorien, and then they too became friends with the dwarves. With the absence of Celeborn and Galadriel in Eregion, Celebrimbor, the grandson of Feanor who crafted the Silmarils, became the leader of the Noldor in that area. And with his leadership, the elves kept good relations with the dwarves of Hadhodrond, as they had named Khazad-dûm in their tongue of Sindarin. In this rare friendship, and through their trading, Celebrimbor crafted a door with moon runes, and great power of stealth, except under moonlight, for the west side of Khazad-dûm as a gift for the dwarves. And he also went so far as to give Durin III, the greatest of the 7 dwarven rings of power, that Anatar, the Lord of Gifts, had instructed the creation of. even though they had originally been made for elves at that time. The first of the 7 rings was crafted and given around the year 1500 of the Second Age, and about 100 years later, when the One Ring was forged, the rings didn't make the dwarves slaves to Sauron like he had hoped, but rather they became luckier in their findings of riches and greedier and prouder in their hoardings and their kingdoms. It is unclear whether the effects of all lesser rings of power worked before the creation of the One Ring as well, but I would doubt it. Anyways, Durin's ring became an heirloom of the House of Durin, and after Annatar betrayed the elves and killed those in Eregion, and destroyed the capital of Ost-in-Edhil in 1697 of the Second Age, the dwarves closed their western and eastern gates, and they secluded themselves in Khazad-dûm. Even until the end of the elves of Eregion, the dwarves held true to their friends, and even fought alongside them, but their efforts and help was not enough to hinder the Dark Lord at that time. Though the elves were eventually victorious in their war with Sauron, the dwarves who were forced to stay secluded by the war efforts lost Mount Gundabad, the renowned location of Durin's awakening, to the orcs and goblins of the north, and they could do nothing about it. Throughout the beginning of the Third Age, after Sauron was thought defeated, trade and friendship resumed with the elves of Lothlorien, and the dwarves mined more extensively for the glorious and renowned wealth of Khazad-dûm, Mithril. As we come to learn in the Fellowship of the Ring, the true treasure of Khazad-dûm wasn't in gold or gems, even though they had those in plenty. It was of Mithril, as Gandalf says. In 1980 of the Third Age, King Durin VI attempted to delve even further than before to find more Mithril, and the dwarves of his kingdom awoke a terror of the depths. Whether it was through the greed from King Durin's ring of power that had passed to him, or through his own folly, the creature killed him and left Khazad-dûm in ruins. Durin VI's son, Nain I, would also be killed, but his grandson, Thrain I, would lead the surviving dwarves to a solitary and lonely peak north of Long Lake, to begin a new kingdom and a new home. The kingdom would be named Erebor, the Lonely Mountain, but the memory of Khazad-dûm remained forever in the hearts of the dwarves. Khazad-dûm was renamed the Black Pit, or Moria in Sindarin Elvish. The creature who expelled the dwarves was called Durin's Bane, and he ruled in Moria alone for 5 centuries, until Mordor, and most likely the Nazgûl from Minas Morgul, sent orcs and goblins to Moria to worship the Balrog as a deity. As these forces multiplied in the depths, Moria became further infested. In 2799 of the Third Age, years after Smaug, the dragon from the north took Erebor from the dwarves, Durin's folk fought the Battle of Azan-nul-Bazar, or the Battle of Moria, against the orcs and goblins of Moria and the Misty Mountains, to try to reclaim their ancestral home. Dane Ironfoot, son of Nain II, avenged his father and slew the commanding orc Azog in the battle, and thus turned the tide. Though this isn't confirmed, and it's just a speculation of mine, I believe Dane looked within Moria's east gate, and he caught a glimpse of Durin's Bane, and that fact, along with the many losses that they had already taken, would prevent them from ever being able to retake Moria while the creature still lived. And although they had won, and the orcs of the Misty Mountains were mostly defeated, the dwarves retreated, eventually going to the Blue Mountains to begin anew. The dwarf king, Thrain II, the heir of Durin the Deathless, was captured in the preceding years on a trip back to Erebor, and thus the ring that Celebrimbor had given Durin III was lost to the necromancer in Dol Guldur. Moria remained in the darkness, and the orcs that survived the battle began to multiply again and sent forces to the Battle of the 5 Armies. In 2989 of the Third Age, Balin, Ori, and Oin, who had helped Thorin reclaim Erebor, took a company of Longbeards into Moria to try to reclaim it with Balin as their leader. They thought they could do this because the goblins, orcs, and Durin's Bane himself had been dormant for many years since the quest for Erebor and since they sent their forces to the Battle of the 5 Armies. Though this expedition seemed successful at first, it soon came to failure, and word stopped coming out of Moria altogether. They were all slain in the next 5 years. The next event to do with Moria came with the Fellowship of the Ring, when the 9 walkers entered the kingdom to cross the Misty Mountains through necessity, as the Redhorn Pass and the Gap of Rohan were too dangerous for them. The group would encounter the Beast, the Watcher in the water outside of the West Gate, and though Moria looked like a tomb, they would be forced to continue through it. After Gandalf had figured out Celebrimbor's riddle, and open the doors of Durin. Now, I'll probably end up making a separate video altogether on the Watcher and its possible origins, but I believe that Sauron probably put the creature there during his war with the elves in Eregion, after the dwarves had closed their doors, in order to trap them in their own kingdom. Once the doors of Durin shut behind the Fellowship, the Watcher pulls down grand trees beside the doors and locked the Fellowship within. After entering Moria, Gimli reminisces about his kinsfolk, Durin the First and the Halls, as well as the three glorious peaks above Moria, Celebdil, Caradhras, and Fanudul. And during their trip through the mines, Gimli actually sang the Song of Durin's Awakening, the same song that I sang a little bit of at the beginning of this video. And as the company journeyed through Moria, Gollum, who had been hiding from the elves in the mines according to Appendix B, began to track the Fellowship within. Eventually, the company discovers Balin's tomb, as well as the Book of Mazarbul, telling of the destruction of Balin's company. Balin was killed by an orc arrow, and laid to rest in that tomb. Oin was lost in one of the upper armories in the Third Deep, under and west of the doors of Durin, in his search for Durin's axe. In the Book of Mazarbul, it says the waters were right up against the wall, and that the Watcher in the waters took Oin and killed him. As for Ori, he was likely the last one alive, as he wrote the final words in the Book of Mazarbul, ere the drums in the deep came for him. Gimli had recognized his writing style, and he knew it was him. Due to Pippin tossing a bucket down a well in the tomb, the drums in the deep began again, and the Fellowship was attacked by orcs. And after Gandalf closed a door on the far side of the tomb, he was blasted back by Durin's Bane, and he ran swiftly down the stairs as the orcs pursued him, and the rest of the company to the bridge of Khazad-dûm. This bridge was made so narrow that only one enemy may cross over a great chasm from the east gate at one time, and it protected the dwarves in its early days, but its width was still large enough for Durin's Bane to come across. Gandalf the Grey faced Durin's Bane upon the bridge after the company discovers that the creature is a Balrog of Morgoth, something no one in Middle-earth had known, but I'm sure only the wise had guessed. The wizard broke the bridge before Aragorn and Boromir could help Gandalf, and the two Maiar fell deep into the foundations of stone. The two fight for 8 days through the tunnels of the Earth Eaters, up the Endless Stair, to the peak of Celebdil, or Zirac Zigil, as it is also known, where the two are ultimately slain. Gwahir the Wind Lord would find Gandalf and bring him to Lothlorien, but Durin's Bane would remain on that peak until the end of his physical form. If you want to learn more about the Balrogs, I'll have a link to a video that I did about them in the description below. The passing of the Fellowship through Moria would change the kingdom forever. Many of the orcs of Moria and the Misty Mountains would try to follow the remaining 8 members of the group into Lothlorien, to be stopped by the elves. Moria, mostly empty of all great threats at this point, would remain dormant until the Fourth Age, when Durin the Seventh, king of the Longbeards and all of Durin's folk, as well as the grandson of Dane Ironfoot, led an expedition into Moria, now that Durin's Bane was gone, and finally, after over 1,000 years, the dwarves took back their grandest home and kingdom. It is unknown what became of the Watcher in the Water, but I'll go into speculations in that video that I make about him. All we know is that he didn't trouble the Free Peoples again, but I doubt he just faded from existence. The dwarves resumed their works in the kingdom, and finally, Khazad-dûm, the kingdom and tomb of Durin the Deathless, was reclaimed and restored. It is there that many dwarves would dwell until the end of their race. I hope you all enjoyed this video, and I really appreciate you guys taking the time out of your day to watch it. Also, a big thanks to those of you who voted on the Facebook page for this video and many others to come. It is because of you that it was made. To participate in future polls that happen every so often for this channel, join us on Facebook through the link in the description below. As for the other topics on the poll, I plan to cover them all in future videos, so make sure to subscribe to see all of those. Once again, thank you all for watching. Leave this video a like if you enjoyed it, and tell me what you think about this dwarf kingdom in the comments. Also, let me know how I can improve for you guys, as this is your community and your channel just as much as it is mine. Share this video with a friend who you think might enjoy it, and as always, thank you for joining me on this adventure. Until the next one, my friends.